Most people assume their ancestors were ordinary. Farmers, tradespeople, quiet families living quiet lives. But some surnames carry a different story. A story of people who broke the law, defied the crown, and survived long enough to pass their name forward. If your surname appears on this list, your ancestors were not quiet. They were hunted. And some of them were extraordinarily good at not being caught. Let me start with one that sounds completely respectable. Fletcher, a common English surname. Sounds like a craftsman, someone who made things with their hands. They did. Arrows. A Fletcher was a professional arrow maker. But in medieval England, arrow making existed inside a legal context that made this surname far more complicated than it appears. Medieval law strictly regulated who could carry arrows outside sanctioned armed service. Poaching, the illegal killing of animals on royal land using bow and arrow, was one of the most harshly punished crimes in medieval England. A man caught faced mutilation, loss of fingers, loss of a hand, regularly carried out. Fletcher families appearing in medieval court records were not always the respectable craftsmen the surname suggests. Many made arrows for their communities and used them for the illegal taking of game from protected land. The forest laws were designed to keep common people from feeding themselves on wildlife that legally belonged to the king. The Fletchers who resisted those laws were not simply criminals. They were people feeding their families in a system designed to keep them hungry. If your surname is Fletcher, your founding ancestor worked with arrows. What they used those arrows for is a more complicated question than the title suggests. But Fletcher is modest compared to what is coming next. The second surname was literally created by the legal system to mark an entire family as enemies of the crown. Yes, Outlaw is an actual surname, and its origin is exactly as direct as it sounds. In medieval law, a person declared an outlaw was formally placed outside the protection of the law entirely. No rights, no legal standing, no protection from violence. Anyone could kill an outlaw without legal consequence. The surname Outlaw was given to families with a documented history of being placed in this legal category. Not a chosen name, an assigned identifier, a permanent marking attached to a family line. The crown had declared enemies of the social order. Here is what makes this surname extraordinary. The families who carried it survived. Being declared an outlaw was supposed to be a death sentence. No resources, no protection. You lived in forests and margins, surviving on what you could find or take. And yet these families survived long enough to pass the name to children. Those children survived to pass it further until it arrived at people living ordinary lives today who may never have known what the word on their birth certificate actually meant. The surname coming next was not assigned by a legal system. It was earned in the most direct way possible. In Scottish border country, the effectively ungoverned territory between Scotland and England. The Reed and Reed families were among the most consistently documented criminal families in the historical record. The Scottish borders were controlled by families called reivers, border reivers, professional raiders who crossed the border in both directions, stealing cattle, burning farms, kidnapping people for ransom. The Reeds and Reeds were documented reiver families. They appear in the borderers' records, government lists of known criminal families, with consistent frequency across the 15th and 16th centuries. Reiving was not occasional crime. It was a full-time occupation passed from father to son. Night riding, silent cattle movement, fighting in the dark, skills taught deliberately and systematically. These families did not consider themselves criminals. They considered themselves operating by older rules, clan rules that predated the national governments trying to impose order on their territory. If your surname is Reed or Reed, with Scottish border roots, your ancestors operated in one of the most consistently lawless regions in British history and survived it very successfully. The surname coming next was not simply associated with outlaws. These people were outlaws by definition, because the law specifically named them enemies of the state. No surname in British history carries the outlaw story as completely as MacGregor. In 1603, the Scottish Parliament made a specific surname illegal, not a crime, not a family member. The name itself. The MacGregor clan had been systematically pushed off their lands by the Campbell clan. Without land, they had no legal standing. Without legal standing, they had no way to feed themselves except by raiding those who had taken their land. The government's solution was not to address the land theft. The solution was to erase the name. The Clan Gregor Proscription Act abolished the MacGregor name entirely. Anyone using it in a legal document faced execution. Parents could not name children MacGregor. People already carrying it were required to abandon it or face death. The MacGregors did not stop being MacGregors. They took other names in public: Campbell, Drummond, Graham, Murray, while keeping their real identity in private, in family gatherings, in trusted company, in memories passed to children with the instruction to remember who they actually were. Rob Roy MacGregor lived most of his life under this prescription. He used aliases, operated between legal identities, became one of the most famous outlaws in Scottish history because the law left him no legitimate alternative. The proscription lasted until 1774. For 171 years, speaking the name MacGregor was a criminal act. Every generation chose identity over safety. The surname coming next is different from everything on this list. These ancestors were not running from the law. They were being hunted across an ocean. Kelly is one of the most common Irish surnames in the world. In Australia specifically, it carries a weight most other Kellys have never had to reckon with. Ned Kelly, born in 1854 in Victoria to Irish immigrant parents, son of a transported convict, raised in poverty, in a society treating Irish Catholic families as permanent suspects. He became an outlaw through a series of confrontations with a colonial police force that targeted his family repeatedly. His mother was imprisoned. His family was harassed. His letter to the colonial government, the Jerilderie Letter, is one of the most extraordinary documents in Australian history. 17,000 words. An intelligent, angry account of what colonial law had done to Irish families across Australia. He was captured at Glenrowan in 1880, wearing armour made from plough mould boards, hanged at Melbourne Gaol on November 11th. His last recorded words were, "Such is life. If your surname is Kelly with Irish or Australian roots, you are carrying a name that has meant defiance of unjust authority for generations." The final surname was carried by people whose crime was not theft or violence. Their crime was simply existing in a country that decided their kind were not welcome. The Romani people arrived in Britain in the late 15th century. The English crown's response was immediate. The Egyptians Act of 1530 ordered all gypsies to leave England within 16 days or face imprisonment. They did not leave, so the law escalated. By 1554, simply being Romani in England was a capital offence, executed not for anything you had done, for what you were, for the family you were born into. Romani families survived by adopting English surnames: Stanley, Boswell, Smith, Lee, Cooper, common names providing cover in a society that had made their existence illegal. They carried English surnames in public. They carried Romani identity in private, in their language, traditions, music, and in the understanding of who they actually were behind the name the law forced them to adopt. If your surname is Stanley, Boswell, or Smith, and your family history contains unexplained gaps, unexpected mobility, or trades associated with Romany occupation, horse trading, metalworking, music, there is a specific historical possibility worth investigating. Your English surname may be a survival strategy adopted by people who had no legal alternative. Outlaws are not always criminals. Sometimes they are people the law decided to criminalize. Sometimes they are people who refuse to disappear when the system told them to. Every surname on this list was carried by both kinds, and every one of them survived long enough to reach you. Subscribe. See ya.